How's everybody doing? I'm glad to have you back for another video. This is probably one of the longer videos I'm gonna make. I'm really gonna be going into detail on my experience with HRT. I'm gonna talk about the whole process of how I got started, why I chose to do pills rather than patches or injections. And then I'm gonna talk about just some of the expectations I had going in compared to what actually ended up happening while I was first starting the hormones, and then I want to talk about a little bit what I'm hoping to have happen in the future. Maybe we'll see what the estrogen gods have in store for me. The estrogen goddesses have blessed me so much so far, so hopefully that continues, but we will see. So let's get into it. Let's start out with how I got started on HRT. Okay, so how did I get started on HRT? So the first thing I had to do was accept that transitioning was the right decision for me personally. And I talked a lot about that in my video the other day, my trans experience. I highly recommend going and watching that if you want to know kind of just about how I came to realize that I was trans, um, and just kind of what my experience was like from a young age up until when I started noticing the things, because I'm always still noticing things that I missed when I was younger, that I was like, maybe that's not a super cis thing to think about. But yeah, I pushed down and ignored a lot of the stuff that I was trans when I was younger, because being raised Christian, I saw the LGBTQ plus community as sinful. That was the way I was raised. I remember really, really vividly, my dad talking very negatively about the LGBT community when gay marriage first became legal. I completely remember him talking about how the country is falling apart and all that stuff. And that really just made it to where I couldn't give myself the opportunity to explore myself in any way. And I internalized a lot of that homophobia and transphobia as I was growing up, and that was something I had to really get past before I could start my transition. But the first thing that I did, with a lot of help from my girlfriend, was find a doctor. I had a trans friend who had already gone through this experience and was already a couple of years on hormones at the time, that I talked to and just kind of got an understanding of what was I in for one, and kind of what do I need to do to get started, because honestly I didn't really know, and it's scary not knowing how to get started on HRT because it's complicated. But yeah, so I decided to go the informed consent route, which I know unfortunately is not available everywhere, but I was living in Ohio at the time, and there was an informed consent place nearby. So I set up an appointment. Sorry, my girlfriend set up an appointment for me to go in, and just get started in the whole process. So now I also want to talk a little bit about that first appointment and just kind of where I went from there to getting onto HRT. So yeah, when I got to the doctor's office, I I sat down with the doctor and I just talked about why I wanted to transition. He asked me questions like, when did you realize that you were trans? How long have you been wanting to transition? Just stuff like that. When did you realize that you were different, I guess? And I was just honest and talked about all of the things that I had realized by that point. And we then went on and moved to talking about, the ways you can take HRT, what the potential side effects of HRT are, because there are risks involved. But for me, the risk of not doing HRT was so much worse that the risk wouldn't matter. But yeah, we did some blood work. This was still part of that first appointment. We did some blood work, and a couple days later, I got my results back, which we found out that I already had low testosterone levels before I even started my testosterone suppressant, which was awesome for me to hear, to be totally honest with you. But I also had to take home a bunch of papers. Like a pamphlet or something. I don't know. I had to look over it. It just talked about HRT and what the potential risks are and all that stuff. I had to sign it and bring it back a week later for a second appointment, which is when I would officially get my prescription to go ahead and get started on HRT. I actually looked up the date for this video. It was November 16th, 2020 was the day I started my transition, which, oh my goodness, that has been almost 10 months and a couple days. That's crazy. Time flies so fast when you quit thinking about how long it takes for stuff to go by. But yeah, next let's get into the different forms of HRT and why I chose the one that I chose. All right, pills, patches, injections. These are our three options, right? I mentioned earlier that I am on the pills. That's the way that I decided to go. And the main reason I chose to do that is, one, I have a good liver. My liver is great. That was a big part of it. And two, I'm scared of needles. Those are the two main things. But if you don't have a strong liver, pills aren't necessarily a great option. I will say that. Patches, honestly, I don't know much about patches. I'm sorry. I tried to look stuff up, but I just couldn't find any source that I genuinely trusted. So I kind of stayed away from. I don't want to talk about it too much, because I just don't know enough about it to be able to discuss it. Maybe in a later video I can compare pills, patches, and injections, just purely looking at those three things, and actually have some of that information to feel comfortable talking about them. But right now I don't know enough about patches to say anything. But then the third one is an injection. And there's a reason those are really popular. They just aren't for me. It's a really great option though. And I was talking with my trans friend before transitioning, and that was what she actually recommended I do. I just don't do well with needles, so that wasn't really an option for me unless it was the only option. That was the way I looked at it. But honestly, if you're okay with needles, go for it. Do the injections if you have that option. So what am I taking right now? I am currently taking 6 tablets of Spiro, 25 milligram tablets, 3 of them in the morning, 3 at night. That's quick math, 150 milligrams. 75 plus 75, yeah, 150 milligrams. And then I'm taking 5 estradiol tablets, which is your estrogen. I'm taking 3 in the morning and 2 at night, and those are all 1 milligram each. So a total of 5 milligrams of estrogen and 150 milligrams of Spiro a day. Holy cow. But Spiro is that testosterone suppressant, and obviously estradiol is your estrogen. But yeah, that is that part of HRT, and I'm gonna go on. And the last thing we really need to talk about for this video is gonna be what I was expecting, what actually happened, and what I hope happens in the future. So yeah, let's get on into that section. Okay, so going with my expectations first, I broke it into physical expectations and then emotional expectations. So my physical expectations, again, I did have that trans friend that I was able to talk to about HRT and like what I was going to be getting myself into, basically. But because of that, and because of doing a ton of reading about HRT before I actually got started, I had the expectation, or at least the hope, that I would start growing breasts around 3 months in. That was one of the big things for me. I expected my hair would get thicker, my skin would get smoother and softer, and I was really hoping that my facial hair would stop growing. But I knew that a lot of those changes that I was hoping for don't even start until around 3 months in. So I had to kind of keep that in mind um, while I was early on in my transition, because it was hard not because I wanted those changes to happen immediately, and that's just not how it happens. It takes some time for your body to adjust to the new hormones. So in reality, with the physical changes, I found my skin getting really smooth and really soft almost immediately. It was crazy fast. Um, but that was definitely the first thing that I noticed. After that, though, there was a little bit of a break until the next thing that started, which was my breasts growing. I started noticing budding at around 2.5 months in ish. It's hard to remember because I didn't actually document it, unfortunately. But I started noticing my chest getting sore a lot and all of that fun stuff. And I was like, oh, I know what's going on. It's happening. It's finally happening. And obviously that growth has continued. Now I'm at about a B cup. That's what I wear right now. Other changes I noticed was I started getting weaker. So I was never particularly strong in the first place, but I did notice that things that used to require a little bit of effort require more effort now. So for example, picking up my dog. He used to be super easy to pick up, but now it's I actually have to try hard to pick him up. And that's not entirely because of him growing. That's just I'm getting weaker. I see it all the way throughout my life, every day. What else did I notice? I've got my notes over here if you're wondering what I'm looking at. But let's see. Oh, this wasn't something that I noticed myself right away, but my girlfriend pointed out to me, was that my face started getting rounder. And that the little fat that I had, if you clicked on the thumbnail and saw the picture of me before transitioning, you can see that there wasn't exactly a lot of fat to begin with. But that fat started moving into my cheeks, into my thighs, into my butt, and into my breast area, and then a little bit into my stomach after those other 3 areas had begun. I also think, now this is not something I know for sure, but I think I've gotten an inch or 2 shorter. I don't know. I want to shrink, but that's not exactly how it works. But I feel like I'm a little bit shorter now. I don't know. I could just be imagining it, but I'm gonna let myself keep imagining it if that isn't actually what happened. And the last thing that I've really noticed, and this is like a super recent thing, is my hips have gotten wider. I noticed that because I got stuck in a chair at work, but we don't need to talk about that. I'm not at that job anymore, but I did get stuck in a chair at work, and that is when I realized, oh, my hips are getting wider. That's awesome. I also want to move on to the emotional expectations and what actually happened. So I knew going in, because of that conversation that I keep referencing, transitioning, especially early on, is super emotional. I was told that I was going to feel my emotions more intensely and all of that fun stuff. Don't be alarmed by how much you start to cry. And that's exactly what happened, and then some. For the actual emotional component, the beginning of HRT was an emotional roller coaster. Because on the one hand, I was super, super happy to finally be on hormones and finally be making progress, right? And I felt those happy emotions so much stronger than I would have before. And that made me cry because I was so happy I was crying. And then on the other hand, I was no longer trying to push down everything that was me about me. And that started popping up more and more areas where I got dysphoric, which made me cry because I was sad. So regardless, I was always crying, basically. And I am going to make a video talking about dysphoria and what it's been like for me, because that is different for everyone. But I will talk about kind of what that has looked like for me. But yeah, once I started feeling those emotions and I started noticing the things that made me dysphoric, it was like floodgates opened up, and everything that was gonna end up making me dysphoric, I was dysphoric about it. I'm looking at my notes, and I was about to move on to my future expectations and what I hope happens, right? And all I wrote was wing this part because I don't know. But yeah, the main things I'm hoping for is just to continue the progress that I've been having so far. If these bad girls can keep growing, that would be great. And the continued thinning out of body hair would also be awesome. But I don't have that as an expectation. That's more of a hope, while the breast growth is more of an expectation. But yeah, that's been my experience with HRT. If you have any questions about either anything to do with hormones or anything about anything, please feel free to leave something in the comments. I would love to answer any other questions you might have. This video in particular, I actually got some inspiration from my Twitch chat, where I spent a good, 20-30 minutes just seeing what kind of questions my chat could come up with over at ZoellaGG on Twitch. Go ahead and go follow me there. But yeah, I love talking to you guys, and I would love to have you come and ask me questions there if you don't feel comfortable asking in the comments, because the comments do last longer. But also you can reach out to me on Discord and ask me messages there. The link to my Discord will be in my Twitch chat. If you just !Discord, it'll pull it up. You can reach out to me there. And yeah, hopefully I was able to help answer some of your questions, I guess. And if I didn't, just let me know what I need to expand on. If I did help you out at all, though, could you help me out and like this video and subscribe?